All right, thanks, Joy. Well, time now for a check of your top stories. And Russian and Ukrainian officials are set to hold another round of talks aimed at a ceasefire, but the U.S. says Vladimir Putin doesn't appear to want a diplomatic solution. The Russian offensive has largely stalled on the ground in Ukraine, although missiles continue to rain down on Kyiv and other cities. Despite the bombardment, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says his government would continue to hold ceasefire talks with Russia. Zelensky is scheduled to deliver a virtual address to Congress on Wednesday. He's expected to urge lawmakers to send more military and humanitarian aid. The White House warned China not to interfere after Moscow reportedly asked Beijing for weapons and cash. And switching gears now to the latest from Puerto Rico. In an address to the island, Governor Pedro Pierluisi promised new and better times just hours before the plan of debt adjustment starts. The plan that was approved by a federal judge for the District of Puerto Rico back in January. And today, our One Caribbean News' Francis Felix reports.
Just hours before the plan of adjustment of the debt going effect, Governor Pedro Pierluisi addressed the country with a message that lasts 4.5 minutes, named The New Era. This message points out the benefits of the PAD and the important step of the economic recovery.
Nuestro gobierno dará un gran paso hacia adelante, un paso hacia la recuperación económica de nuestra isla.
Finally, the government leaves behind the bankruptcy and dedicates all its efforts to achieving the future of progress, affirmed Pierluisi during his message. Confident that the execution of the debt adjustment plan will lead to the island economic recovery. He recalled that the government's bankruptcy prevent our access to capital for permanent works and cause problems on public finance. Also recognized that the PAD is not perfect but have a lot of good things. He explains that it removes all collection claims against our government and cleanses our credit for the future. In addition, he says that from $33 billion owed to creditors, we will now only owe $7.5 billion, a reduction of almost 80%. Pierluisi added that prior to PAD, the government will have had to pay its creditors 25 cents of every dollar that enters the government. Now that's down to 7 cents. That is why we can say that the restructured debt is sustainable. He maintained at a time when there are lawyers and economists who argue that the island could fall back into bankruptcy. The governor pointed out that other important benefit is the reserve it creates for the payment of pensions to retirees and the return of more than $200 million to the retirement accounts of thousands of public employees who lost their savings. For Pierluisi, this represents the proximity of the end of the Financial Oversight and Management Board in Puerto Rico. From San Juan, Puerto Rico, Francis Felix.
All right, thanks so much for that report, Francis. Well, meantime, Prime Minister Gaston Brown says the citizenship by investment programs in Antigua and Barbuda, among other Caribbean countries, are under threat. He says countries with these economic citizenship programs must end them or face visa requirements to enter countries in Europe. And speaking on local radio over the weekend, Brown said Eastern Caribbean countries could suffer a major blow if this comes to pass. He said Antigua currently rakes in about $100 million annually from the program, but other islands depend even more on citizenship by investment programs.
In the case of Antigua and Barbuda, about 10% of our revenue, or maybe if I'm exaggerating, no more than probably 12-15% comes from CIP. But in some countries within the sub-region, the CIP contributes up to 50% of the annual revenue. So you can imagine the impact in those countries. It would be a very difficult proposition.
Now, Brown says he believes there is a lack of understanding about the due diligence involved in granting economic citizenship in Antigua and Barbuda, among other Caribbean countries, and he has also written to those officials who are pushing to have the citizenship by investment program scrapped.
The U.S., as you know now, they have two congressmen who have decided now to go further and to pass legislation, and one of the provisions is to work in lockstep with the European Union to get them to discontinue the Schengen visa-free access into Europe. So I have taken the opportunity to write to policymakers, parliamentarians in Europe, as well as those two congressmen who are now tabling this legislation, to let them know the impact that they're about to inflict on our CIP programs and the impact on our economies. I would have reassured them as well about the type of due diligence that we have in place.
Now, the Commonwealth Games, meantime, are set for Birmingham, London this summer, and there is a movement of the Queen's baton ahead of this big event. Our One Caribbean News' Deandra Hamilton reports.
The Commonwealth Games are set for Birmingham, London this coming July. Ahead of the Games, there is the movement of the gorgeous Queen's baton around the Commonwealth countries of the world.
Here in Turks and Caicos Islands, we have many activities, and this is the first part of our activity unveiling of the banner.
As 54 nations on Monday marked Commonwealth Day, and ahead of the arrival of the Queen's baton to the Turks and Caicos, the local association unveiled a banner with the help of government officials.
Actually, the opportunity for us to also hype up our students, because our students will be participating in track and field as well as swimming. So we have the opportunity to hype up the country, and we are doing this simultaneously on all the islands, as we're going to unveil our signage in preparation for the arrival of the Queen's baton.
The plan for the Queen's baton is to traverse the major inhabited islands and keys of the TCI.
We're receiving the baton from the Bahamas. So an individual from the Bahamas will be bringing the baton to us here in Turks and Caicos, and one of our very own, Jay Kelly, will be taking the baton from Turks and Caicos onto the Cayman Islands.
The Games will be a wonderful time to showcase the Turks and Caicos Islands as a destination as well. It has drawn the sponsorship of the Ministry of Tourism. Josephine Connolly, the minister, is excited about joining the baton relay as well.
And the publicity from this, and we will benefit from this as we continue to celebrate the #1 beach in the whole wide world. So this is more publicity for Turks and Caicos Islands.
The baton arrives in the Turks and Caicos from the Bahamas on April 6th. It will spend 2 days in the islands. Deandra Hamilton reporting.
All right, thanks for that report, DeAndre. Well, meantime, authorities in South Florida are preparing more than 100 migrants to process and send back to Haiti. They arrived in a sailboat at an oceanfront in Summerland Key. Now, that's about 20 miles west from Key West. Officials have intercepted nearly 1,000 migrants from Haiti since late 2021 in smuggling operations they describe as glowingly sophisticated. Traffickers using GPS navigation are able to make more dangerous routes in waters that are not frequently monitored by authorities. The sailboat they used this time had an outboard motor, but was not big enough to safely carry so many people. Authorities believe the group was at sea for several days. 4 of them were taken to the hospital with dehydration. And meantime, the CDC has lowered its coronavirus warnings for cruise ship. The travel health notice has been lowered to level 2, which is considered moderate risk for the CDC for COVID-19. Now, the CDC continues to urge passengers to get the recommended COVID vaccine, saying vaccination is still the best way to protect against severe disease. The agency says cruise ship travel should be avoided by anyone who is not up to date with their COVID vaccines and are at an increased risk for severe illness from the disease. Wearing a mask during the cruise when outside the cabin or in crowded outdoor settings is still recommended. And at least 2 people are killed and dozens more are injured following a gas explosion at a Mexican resort on Monday. According to Mexican authorities, a gas tank exploded in the kitchen area at the Coral Beach restaurant on Mexico's Caribbean coast. 2 of the restaurant's employees were killed. At least 18 people were injured, including 3 customers and 15 staff members. Now, 8 of those individuals who were injured have been released from hospitals. The other 10 do remain hospitalized. There have been other instances where poor management of cooking gas lines has resulted in deadly accidents on Mexico's Caribbean coast. Back in 2018, a gas leak in a water heater caused the death of an American couple and their 2 children in the resort town of Tulum. And in 2010, an improperly installed gas line exploded at a hotel in Playa del Carmen, killing 7 people.